from Los Angeles. The excitement, the exhilaration, the energy. All the experience and excellence of the BBC One team, bringing you the first action, the best action. The Los Angeles Olympics. Thrilling, spectacular, world-beating on BBC One, the Olympic Channel.
Over on BBC Two in a moment, there's episode 3 of Leaving by Carla Lane, with Keith Barr and Susan Hampshire as the parting couple, whose children have learned to cope with the situation, but their pet dog is finding it hard to adapt. Here on BBC One in 25 minutes, there's another chance to see Bob Monkhouse in conversation with the late Tommy Cooper, along with Karen Kay and American comedian Stephen Wright. Now, the main news of the day with Richard Whitmore. It's 9 o'clock.
Clashes among the convoys. Miners try to stop the supplies to Llanwern. Ronnie Knight says, "I'll talk to Scotland Yard on my own terms." First round victory for the man who hopes to marry his mother-in-law. Mardale revisited, the village the drought brought back. And taking a bit of a liberty on July the 4th. Good evening. South Wales has seen its worst picket line violence since the miners' strike began. Dozens of miners were arrested at Llanwern as police tried to clear the way for convoys of lorries delivering coke and iron ore to the steelworks. The violence came as miners' leaders prepare for their peace talks with the coal board, now confirmed for tomorrow. This report from Elvin Thomas.
It was the arrival of a massive convoy of about 140 lorries carrying iron ore that sparked off the worst violence of the day at Llanwern. Approximately 70 pickets were waiting at a motorway turn-off not far from the entrance to the steelworks, and they surged forward through the police lines to try and stop the lorries. But despite the fighting, the lorries carried on through, although cans and stones were hurled at them, breaking several windscreens. Even policemen's helmets were sent flying amid the most violent scenes to have happened in South Wales since the miners' strike began. While the first of the lorries were passing the fighting at Llanwern, the convoy tail-enders were still some 5 miles away. The scenes on the M4 as 140 lorries going one way past 50 empties going in the other direction toward the ore and coal stocks at Port Talbot were quite remarkable. The South Wales NUM has been pledged to avoid mass picketing, but the miners are angry about the attitude of lorry drivers to their picket lines. They claim the token pickets outside Llanwern have been taunted in recent days by drivers waving their paychecks at them. And a spokesman for the union said that today's scaling up of the picketing, which resulted in dozens of arrests, was to test the police reaction. He added that unless the police agree to stop the lorries so that pickets could talk to drivers, the miners would be back.
It was the boasts of some of the lorry drivers which finally pushed the Gwent miners into action. Today, we rode in the convoy with one of those drivers who was unwilling to be identified.
I've got a living to make, I've got a wife at home, I've got a house and a mortgage to pay, and I can't afford to be out of work. Because if I didn't cross these pickets, I think my boss would be laying me off.
We've heard of some lorry drivers saying that they've been carrying their money home in wheelbarrows. Are you making a lot of money?
That statement was made as a joke, and it's been turned around as something serious.
How much money are you making?
I think that's rather personal, that.
But this particular situation, do you have any sympathy with the miners?
Oh, definitely got sympathy for the miners, but they say they're backing, they want us to back them, but they wouldn't back the steel workers. They said they did, but they never backed the steel workers during the strike in 1980.
Today you've run the gauntlet of 70 or even 100 pickets at Port Talbot. Did that frighten you? Did it make you think that perhaps it's not a sensible thing to do?
Well, it definitely frightens me, yes, but well, as I say, I've got a job to do.
The only miner still reporting for duty at the Long Annet colliery in Scotland arrived there before dawn to beat the pickets, but they were waiting for him when he left for home. Mike Smart watched what happened.
The reception committee of strikers at the pit gate was in hostile mood. Mr. Pearson had successfully dodged them on Monday, taken Tuesday off, and arrived at work before dawn this morning. But this afternoon, there was no escape. As Mr. Pearson approached first time, the police couldn't hold the pickets, and his van didn't even make the gates. On the second attempt, it collided with them. It was attempt number 4, which was successful, and Mr. Pearson's van, in which the windows had already been repaired after being broken by stones on Friday, sped away. The pickets let it be known they were not pleased, and following reports that some were on their way to Mr. Pearson's home, the police quickly made their way there to keep the peace. The strikers, however, found that Mr. Pearson had got there before them, and the lone miner, who's been determined to work now for almost a week, was staying firmly behind closed doors and speaking to no one.
The whole question of who foots the bill for the police operations in several counties is worrying many regional authorities. In South Yorkshire, they've already refused to pay for the police presence at the Orgreave coking plant, and the Labour Control Committee there won't sanction costs of up to £38,000 a week for police picket duty at the British Steel plant. Now, Sir Michael Havers, the Attorney-General, is challenging their decision in court on Friday. Our Home Affairs correspondent, Bill Hamilton, on how the costs are mounting.
As the policing costs of the strike continue to soar, so too does the political temperature. The Chief Constable, who has operational control over these men, says he's now caught in a political sandwich. Though his police committee have no power over the number of men he deploys, they're refusing to meet bills for billeting and feeding them. That's now to be challenged in court. But police authorities in the metropolitan areas generally are clearly frustrated at their attempts to exercise any control in the present situation.
We are slowly losing financial control of everything that's going on in our own areas. It appears that chief constables are beginning to lose operational control because of the dictates from the National Reporting Centre. I can only assume that the only person controlling it is the Home Secretary.
With the strike now in its 17th week, the policing bill is still rising at more than £250,000 a day. In Nottinghamshire, the costs are fast approaching £40 million. Derbyshire's bill stands at £8 million, and Leicester and South Yorkshire around £6 million. Police working 16-hour shifts are earning substantial overtime. For inspectors, it can mean total pay of £500 a week, for constables around £400. By the end of the week, the total number of arrests is expected to pass the 4,000 mark. 2 miners have died on the picket lines, and injuries to both police and pickets now stand at 640.
Black miners in South Africa have been striking for a 25% rise in their wages, which are far below those of their white counterparts. It's a bitter dispute in which at least one miner has been shot dead. Our Southern Africa correspondent, Michael Burke, looks at the grievances which led to the trouble.
High in the mountains of Lesotho, blacks queue up for the chance to be a miner in South Africa. The mines office is besieged by men wanting jobs and women wanting their remittance money. It's like this all over the subcontinent. South Africa's mines have an endless need for labour. The surrounding countries have an inexhaustible supply of poor people ready to sign up with their thumbs for a year as a migrant labourer. They must leave their families behind and live in a compound far from home. But South Africa promises prosperity of a kind that many can't resist. Almost half the 450,000 blacks who work down South Africa's pit shafts are foreigners. Most of the rest come from the so-called black homelands. By law, less than 3% of the black workforce are allowed to live with their families. Conditions in South Africa's mines have improved greatly, though 800 miners a year are killed in accidents, and the present average wage of £40 a week is still comparatively low here. The wage gap between the races underground has narrowed, but whites are still paid 6 times as much as blacks and still reserve for themselves key jobs with explosives. The conglomerates that own some of the richest gold, platinum and coal mines in the world count themselves liberal and have allowed blacks to form a union. But now that union has rejected a pay offer of 14%. An industry that makes £1 billion a year, the union says, should pay a living wage. This NUM, formed 2 years ago, has demanded 25% and threatened industrial action. South Africa now faces its first serious, legal black strike. The man who'll lead it is the lawyer and former political detainee, Cyril Ramaphosa.
I can understand it if some corner shop owner says he can't afford to pay 25%, but the Chamber of Mines can. There is no mine which made a loss last year. All we're asking for is for the bosses to share those profits that they made with us.
The emergence of recognised black unions has been arguably the most significant reform here for decades. This dispute will prove a crucial test, not just for the mine workers, but for the infant black union movement as a whole. Black unions still only have a foothold here and are tolerated by the government only if they stick to industrial matters and steer clear of politics. It's a dividing line difficult to keep for a leader threatening an industry that provides half the country's export earnings. Inevitably, Cyril Ramaphosa is being called the Black Arthur Scargill. There's an immense difference in personal style, but they share political ambitions.
Our ultimate aim is to transform the country and the laws that rule this country.
In Spain tonight, Ronnie Knight said he would speak to Scotland Yard detectives who want to talk to him about two of Britain's biggest robberies. But he said it would have to be on his own terms with a lawyer present. Christopher Morris spoke tonight at his villa on the Costa del Sol.
Knight now spends much of his time locked inside the luxury villa after refusing to see Scotland Yard detectives who want to question him about the multi-million-pound robberies. Actress Barbara Windsor, his estranged wife, often enjoyed holidays here, relaxing by the pool, which overlooks the Mediterranean. With him now is Sue Haylock, an Englishwoman Knight says he may soon marry. She angrily rejected the allegations he was involved in the robberies. Knight now claims he's innocent and that underworld supergrasses have pointed the finger at him in a gigantic frame-up. Mr. Knight, why won't you see the Scotland Yard detectives who want to question you about the robberies?
Well, I'm willing to see them at the right time because I've had all this before to prove my innocence. And I went back to prove my innocence, which I was in Spain before. And as I went back, I finished up in 6.5 months in custody till I was found innocent. And
that was on the attempted murder charge?
Attempted murder, yes.
Can I ask you the direct question then? Were you involved in these robberies?
No way, no way. Load of rubbish. Absolutely rubbish.
To protect your innocence then, how are you going to combat the allegations as they've been made so far?
Well, I'm willing to go back if I know they just want to speak to me, or you know there's supergrasses around, so someone's going to come up with and tell the truth who these people are.
A man has won the first stage of his battle to marry his mother-in-law. Marriage between in-laws has been banned since the days of Henry VIII, but today a House of Lords committee agreed that a bill to allow the marriage could be brought in. Gary Lloyd reporting.
Alan Monk is a 29-year-old lorry driver. 14 months ago, he and his 24-year-old wife Jeanette divorced. It was after they'd split up that Alan and his mother-in-law Valerie, a widow 20 years his senior, fell in love. In spite of the fact that they need parliamentary approval, they're determined to marry.
I know it's old-fashioned, but when you come down to the legal terms of it, you know, different things you have to do legally, it's so complicated, and plus we want to get married because of the children's sake.
Why do you want to get married?
Because I don't believe in living together.
Why not?
I don't believe in it. I never have done.
Now, there's 20 years difference between you in your age. Does that bother you at all?
What's age difference these days?
It did at first, but it doesn't anymore.
If I was over 30, people wouldn't take no notice of it, would they? But as it's 29, it's the same as saying a price is £9.99, it's cheaper than £10.
And if I was younger than Alan, Alan was older than me, no one would say anything anyway.
What do you think the effect on your children is likely to be?
The effect hasn't changed. The children are happier. They're more happier, actually, now than... I've noticed a change in the children.
Isn't it quite an adjustment to suddenly find your former husband becoming your stepfather?
No, because there's no... I can't really explain it. The relationship between us all, the family side of it, hasn't really changed. We're still friendly, there's no bitterness, there never has been any bitterness. Even the divorce, we both agreed on the divorce.
The marriage of Alan and Jeanette Monk lasted 5 years. The parliamentary permission he needs to wed his mother-in-law could take 12 months. The couple say it's worth the wait, the £1,000 or so the legalities are likely to cost, and their wedding would remain in the family.
The consecration of the new Bishop of Durham, Professor David Jenkins, is to go ahead as planned. The Archbishop of York, Dr. John Hapgood, today overruled objections, but demonstrators say they will protest outside and inside York Minster when the ceremony takes place on Friday. They're angry about Professor Jenkins' views, questioning the historical basis of the virgin birth and the resurrection. One of his main critics, the Reverend William Ledwidge, said tonight it was a tragedy that the consecration was going ahead. He had organised a petition of more than 12,000 signatures asking for a delay.
The petitioners demanded that the bishop-elect publicly affirm his orthodox Christian faith before his consecration. But the Archbishop said the protesters were confused and unrepresentative of Durham clergy or lay people. It's Professor Jenkins' beliefs about the virgin birth and the resurrection that alarm some traditional church members. He's been dubbed a modernist, but in an interview earlier in the row, he explained his faith.
My conviction is that the virgin birth is a story which grew up something like a generation or 2 generations after the death of Jesus to express the faith that he was uniquely from God and represents God to us.
The Archbishop called an unprecedented news conference to reject a postponement. The Archbishop of Canterbury endorsed this decision, he said, and his support for the new, marvellous bishop was adamant.
Professor Jenkins is willing to affirm his faith in the doctrine of the Church of England in the form which the Church requires of him. There is no doubt about this. I'm quite sure in my own mind that he will do this with the utmost sincerity.
A leaflet and letters detail the theological argument. The Archbishop hopes Friday's ceremony at York Minster won't be disrupted, and he had a special message for Durham churchgoers.
He is going to open up all sorts of new channels of understanding and new contacts with people right outside the church, if you will let him. So make the most of him while you've got him and learn from him, and don't feel that he is threatening the basic Christian faith, because he's not.
The publisher Robert Maxwell has made an £80 million bid for the Mirror group of newspapers, whose titles include the Daily and Sunday Mirror. Mr. Maxwell has been trying to gain control of a national newspaper for some years, but tonight the group's owners, Reed International, said they weren't interested in Mr. Maxwell's offer. More than 300 workers at Lear Fan's 2 factories in Northern Ireland, Antrim and Newton Abbey, have been told they'll be made redundant next month, without a guarantee of getting their jobs back when the factories reopen next year. Originally, the management had planned to lay off the workforce for only 6 months. BL has been fined for breaking the common market's rules on competition. The company has been ordered to pay more than £200,000 for trying to hinder British consumers aiming to import BL cars they bought more cheaply in Europe. The company says it will appeal. The sun has been shining in the tiny village of Mardale today for the first time in half a century. The Lake District village, flooded to create a reservoir, has been uncovered by the drought affecting much of Western England.
They were walking down the main street of the village of Mardale today, 50 years after it was flooded to create a reservoir. But with water levels approaching an all-time low, the drowned village has surfaced again. Haweswater is one of the biggest reservoirs in the country. It supplies a third of the water used in the northwest at the rate of 150 million gallons a day. But the lake is now less than half full and the level is falling daily. And in this, one of the wettest areas of England, the past 5 months have been the driest on record, with no substantial rainfall since January. To bring the water back to an acceptable level would need 27 inches of rain, the equivalent of a month's torrential downpour.
The Foreign Secretary has told MPs Britain and its allies won't take no for an answer in their search for better relations with the Soviet Union. Sir Geoffrey Howe said he hoped his trip to Moscow would lead to more exchanges despite the negative Soviet attitude. He denied opposition claims that he had acted as a cheerleader for the United States. He said he was trying to build a bridge of confidence and wanted to see that the talks on banning space weapons went ahead in September. Some London residents dined in style tonight thanks to a call from a special royal visitor. It was the ducks at the Barbican Centre which first caught the Queen Mother's attention. But the fish weren't to be outdone, and royal protocol went by the board in the rush to grab dinner. Later, a visit to a police station, and there it was different fare for another royal favourite. And a surprise visitor to the royal box at Wimbledon. The Princess of Wales, a keen tennis fan, spent much of the afternoon enjoying events on the centre court. And the champion John McEnroe is through again to the semi-finals, together with another American, an Australian and a Czech. McEnroe, going for his third championship, will play the unseeded Australian Pat Cash, and the number 2 seed, Ivan Lendl, will meet Jimmy Connors, who won the first of his 2 titles 10 years ago. But it was 2 losers who made a bit of tennis history today. Paul Annacone and Karina Carlson became the first 2 qualifiers to appear on centre court on the same day. This report from Michael Blakey.
The first qualifier on the centre court was Karina Carlson, the 20-year-old Swedish girl who knocked out Virginia Wade on the way to her quarter-final match against Chris Lloyd. But Mrs. Lloyd, who's won the championship 3 times, went through to her 12th semi-final, where she'll play Hannah Mandlikova.
Game, set and match, Mrs. Lloyd.
The next qualifier on the court was Paul Annacone, the 21-year-old American playing in his first professional tournament. His quarter-final opponent, Jimmy Connors, the man who never gives up. But Connors soon had Annacone stretched over the net. Connors won in straight sets and plays Lendl in the semi-finals. The champion, John McEnroe, cruised into the semi-finals where he'll play the Australian Pat Cash, but he too had his spills on the way to victory.
There's been a big surprise in the first round of this season's NatWest cricket trophies. Minor county Shropshire have beaten Yorkshire by 37 runs. Shropshire owed their win to Mushtaq Mohammed, the former Northampton Pakistan all-rounder. He scored 80 runs in the Shropshire total of 229 and then took 3 Yorkshire wickets. While Americans are celebrating Independence Day, the most famous symbol of their freedom, the Statue of Liberty, has been undergoing a £20 million facelift. For the first time in its 98-year history, the statue's upraised torch has been removed for repairs.
It's the nation's birthday, and it is the statue's. Miss Liberty is 98 years old, clad in scaffolding and needing more than a facelift. She's structurally unsound, in for 2 years of repairs and renovations, and the only part that needs replacing completely is the torch in the upheld hand. The lowering of the torch was an occasion of national symbolism. It was a patriotic event all 4th of July. The statue has come to stand for America's welcome for immigrants, and before the huddled masses of invited guests, Chrysler chairman Lee Iacocca, himself the son of Italian immigrants, pledged that the welcome and the symbol would stand for another 100 years.
Miss Liberty still holds out that beacon of hope, and the immigrants still keep coming.
So the choir joined in a chorus of God Bless America, and the torch of liberty, the light that has shone over the approach to New York since 1868, was extinguished, but not forever. It will be replaced.
Tonight's main story is once again, there's been the worst picket line violence in South Wales since the miners' strike began. Dozens of miners were arrested at Llanwern as lorries carrying coke and iron ore arrived at the steelworks. And in Spain tonight, one of the men Scotland Yard want to question about two of Britain's biggest robberies says he'll talk to the police, but on his own terms and with a lawyer present. Finally, in Japan, land of advanced technology, some of the old customs are dying out. Children, it seems, are adept at using computers, but they're going to special classes to learn how to use chopsticks. From Tokyo, William Horsley.
The Japanese have been shocked to find that so many of their young are unable to use the utensils that have served for generations. Japanese culture itself seems under threat, and drastic situations call for drastic remedies. In primary schools like this, lunch is sometimes preceded by a lesson in the correct way to hold your chopsticks. Don't grab hold of them any old how and shovel the food in. Use a little science. The third finger should go in between the two chopsticks, like so. Just like holding a pencil, teacher says. If you've got it right, you should be able to pick up anything on your plate, even slippery noodles. The art is to keep your chopsticks roughly parallel. They shouldn't drift too far apart, and they shouldn't cross over one another. It's not all plain sailing. This class, at least, is getting off on the right foot. But what about all those youngsters, now a majority, who aren't being taught? It's feared they may grow up without ever acquiring one of the basic skills involved in being Japanese.
And who can think of a few youngsters here at home who could do with a similar course on how to use the knife and fork? Well, that's it for now. The late headlines will be at just after 11:20. Till then, good night.
Tomorrow sees the birthday of the BBC's television news service, and to mark the occasion, Richard Baker looks back at the first 30 years, from its early beginnings at Alexandra Palace to the present day. That's on BBC Two at 8:20 tomorrow night.
Hello. Well, it's been another very warm, sunny day, of course, in many parts of the country. Temperatures up into the 70s. At Anglesey in North Wales, over 15 hours of sunshine. And over the next few days, a lot of warm, sunny weather yet to come. But there will be some changes in the north. This front will be working its way down, bringing cloud, bringing a little bit of rain. But as it gets down towards the borders with England, I think much of the rain will have died out. Let's have a look at the satellite picture. This is an enlargement from what you normally see. Let me point out a bit to orientate you. There's southwest England, glorious Devon. Coming eastwards, you can start to see a bit of the cloud that built up, but that was fair weather cloud today. Patches of cloud along the east coast too. And as we come northwards, a good deal of sunshine. Patches of cloud around, of course, but a good deal of sunshine. There's the significant cloud well up to the northern part of Scotland. So as far as tomorrow's concerned, really much the same as today. Most places dry. There will be a lot of warm sunshine about, up to 24 centigrade, 75 Fahrenheit. But again, with sea breezes, it'll be cooler along many of the coasts. But after saying that, I think sitting on the beach in the deck chair in the sun should be quite pleasant. And even along the east coast, where there will be patchy cloud from time to time, even there, I think, rather more in the way of sunshine than you've had today. In the far northwest, though, a good deal of cloud here, and later on, perhaps a little rain. That's it from me. Good night.
Starting next Wednesday on BBC One, End of the Line, a series of 5 plays about life in a recession-hit Scottish new town. The Silver Bullet, about the problems of redundancy.
Look at the bullet. A lot is. The closing is done.
You want to be careful. Any trouble, you'll lose your ex gratia. That's a lot of money to lose. That was you. Take the money and skedaddle.
Blowout.
I quite like the sound of that job in the American bar. They're seeing people today.
My wife of mine's going out to work for her living when I'm sitting idle at home.
Sweet Nothings, and another factory faces closure.
What kind of fight were you thinking of putting up?
Oh, maybe a sit-in. I think we've got a very good case.
Market Charlotte bloody Scarborough.
Focusing on the problems of the young, a view of things.
I mean, when I was at school, there was at least the illusion it was all leading somewhere, you know? Get yourself a good education, get on, get out of the bit. But now...
And workhorses.
Listen, son, you're just a stupid wee boy with a stupid wee job and a stupid wee wage packet. What would you do if you weren't working for me, eh? Tell me that, tell me. Nothing. Bullseye, son. Nothing.
A Clydesdale horse provides a sense of purpose in the first play in the series End of the Line, starting next Wednesday at 10:20 on BBC One.
On BBC Two, in 5 minutes, Goodbye Days, about 2 lifelong friends who spend a final day together before one sets off for New Zealand. This is BBC One. Now, here's Bob Monkhouse.